Stacy, lead us in this. What do we mean when we say parent empowerment? What does that look like, and how can we implement that? How can we, if you're listening to our podcast for the first time, let's say someone's listening to the first time. If you are, welcome. And they just want to know how to be empowered.
Mm-hmm.
So take us down that road.
Mm-hmm. So I'll take you down the road. In fact, in just sort of, I guess, how I responded to this parent. So my concept is parent empowerment is about becoming educated around something specific, something general. But for here, the purposes of this, it's about parenting an autistic child. And so I think of the education component, but I don't think that, me helping parents understand autism and the strategies that will be helpful, educating them on that is not empowering them, right? Empowering the parents is giving them the ability, the confidence, the practicality to actually do it, right? Lots of parents go to trainings and see, this is what you do, or they get a general infographic on Instagram, which is beautifully done, but the parents are like, okay, I don't really know what to do with the visual. How? Like what? I know, but I don't really know. So I have always felt as a speech therapist when I started working that parents needed to know. I could not be successful as a speech therapist if my parents didn't know what I was working on so that they could support their child every day, because you cannot resolve anything twice a week for 30 minutes. I mean, that's just ridiculous. Like I don't even know what that is. So thinking in terms of, I actually put together a workbook that I've been working on for quite some time now, even though it seems to be a very simple document, but I wanted it to reflect what I thought. No, not what I thought. I wanted it to reflect what I've been doing, right? And oh my gosh, can I do a brag moment for just a second? Like seriously, I wanted to do this when I got on the podcast with you, but now I'm going to do it, and you can edit it out if you want to. Right before this podcast, I received a couple of messages from a mom of a new diagnosed 2-year-old, and we've been communicating, and she just asked the most brilliant questions. I mean, her questions are just, oh my gosh, that was a great question. So then I have the opportunity to respond with a video message, right? Because it's back and forth. So I was listening back to what I said so I could write notes on what I needed to send her. And I literally said to myself, damn, Stacy, you are really good at empowering parents. Like, seriously, like I was just like feeling myself for just a moment and listening to what I was telling this parent and then reflecting on how they responded. And I was like, like this is really, and it wasn't so much about, ooh, Stacy, you're really good at it. It's like, this is where you're supposed to be, right? Like this is your purpose. This is what you're supposed to be doing. So with that said, Torrin, do you want me to get to some of the areas that I think are important in empowerment, or do you want to pause?
Like I said, lead us down the road.
Did I lead you around the mulberry bush to get to the road? All right. We are now at the entryway of the road. So one of the things that I think is important is, and this is one of the reasons I started my business, parents get a diagnosis of autism. Here, your child is autistic. Your child has autism. And then they're given a piece of paper that says their child has autism. They are usually told to get certain specific therapies, or they're told, here, go find resources, or they're told your child is not going to become anything and find an institution. Yes, people are still saying that. So my pet peeve years ago, before I started Everything Autism, was nobody's telling parents what autism is. Like, why aren't they telling parents what autism is? Like, if your child gets diagnosed with Down syndrome, if your child gets diagnosed with cerebral palsy, somebody pulls you in a room, they give you pamphlets to look at, they recommend books for you to read, and they explain to you and give you resources that you can learn and understand that particular diagnosis that your child has. Nobody ever does that for autism. So I think part of becoming an empowered parent is understanding, what does that diagnosis mean? What is autism exactly? And then what does that mean for your child as an autistic individual? And if you have more than one child that's autistic, it means something different for each one of them. So that's number one. Questions?
I think the issue is they do kind of do that with autism. It's just no one really. The thing about autism is it's so hard to define. Its diagnosis criteria is sort of changed over the years, and it presents so differently. Like, for example, and I'm not an expert on Down syndrome or cerebral palsy, but from what I've seen and from what I know, they tend to present in more or less the same ways. There are
Yeah,
variances, of course,
I
but
agree.
with autism,
Hmm.
there is such a difference. And we're talking about going from like nonverbal, struggling to find different ways of communication and like not click checking off any of the boxes that you see in a quote unquote normal child's development to
Mhm.
someone who checks off pretty much all of those boxes but just talks a little bit too much about trains and struggles to make friends. That's a
Mhm.
huge gap. So that's one of the challenges of
Mhm.
knowing autism. And as a result, it creates the problem you laid out, which is no one tells you what autism is because no one knows.
Yes. So I am a problem solver. So I am going to solve this problem. And the way I'm going to solve this problem is I'm going to push back on what you said. You're correct. There are lots of spectrum nuances, right? There's something concrete to show with Down syndrome. There's a piece of paper that shows what they saw in the genetic testing. There's an obvious physical difference in cerebral palsy. You can see the results of a hearing test. However, however, when you tell a parent that their child has a diagnosis of autism, you should, in 2025, 2022, 2001, you should be able to refer at least one or two books that are written by autistic people, because if your job is providing diagnosis for parents, then you should have these resources available. You should also be able to say a simple phrase to help parents not feel overwhelmed and devastated and traumatized. And the simple phrase could be, your child has a diagnosis of autism based on blah, 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 blah. So, what this means is your child is the same child they are right now that they were yesterday before we wrote this on a piece of paper. However, now we know that your child experiences the world a little different than you do, than maybe some other kids. They take in information and they process it differently. And so we have to figure out how to support them through this. And the two most important things for you to look into are understanding their sensory processing system and making sure you are addressing communication needs. Okay, that took me less than 2 minutes to say. You could have someone write that on a piece of paper, a postcard. I don't really care. Call Stacy, I'll make it for you. Doctors, psychologists, diagnosticians, educators, and therapists should have something concrete and reasonable to give parents an idea so that parents don't go home thinking they have a horrific, traumatic, terrible situation, because that's the way parents feel when no one tells them anything different. That's all I'm saying. That's
Well,
all I'm saying.
doctors do have a concrete way of addressing autism. It's just horrific and terrible how they describe it. They're like, it's not like the doctors are walking in and saying, we don't know what autism is. What they're saying is, in fact, one thing I find interesting is when doctors give you a diagnosis of the two examples we use are cerebral palsy and Down syndrome, or any sort of like developmental disorder, it's always followed by like platitudes about, yes, these are challenges, but your kids can still live a relatively normal life if we do X, Y, and Z, things like that. They don't even do that with autism. They're just like, your kid is fucked, lady. You are
Yeah.
screwed. The GG's in the chat. It's done. It's a wrap. Like, and this is and this is probably your fault. Like, that's what they're telling parents. So
Yes.
they are telling them something. It's just the worst thing possible.
So, we all know that phrase. If you know better, do better. It is 2025. We have information accessible to us that we shouldn't have, that we need, that we want, that we overdose on, that we take too much of, but it is all there, especially in America. We have no, as of yet, boundaries on what we have access to.
Yeah, how's that going? Very, very. How's that going for us? Yeah,
Well,
I'm definitely gonna have to edit that part out. That part's definitely getting edited out.
why is that so funny? Okay, so that was my number one, right? So I don't bore all the listeners. Let me move through the list quickly, huh? All right. Well, not quickly, but efficiently. All right. So one, parents need to know what that is, right? And not so much they need to know everything about autism. They need to understand the basic concept of how their child experiences the world different. And now that they have a diagnosis, they can look for resources to help them figure out, how does my child experience the world? What do I need? What now? Right? The other part is, I think there's certain things parents need to know. And I don't think so a lot of times parents feel like they need to know everything, right? They need to read everything, they need to know everything, they need to know blah, 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 blah. Not really. I think parents, to become really truly empowered, it's not about learning everything, knowing everything, wanting to be an expert on it, or running to become a therapist, right? So you can like fix your child or be the expert. Parents are already experts on their child. I feel like I just help them with the why and what to do, but they know their child, until someone, tries to tell them different, but they know. So things that I think parents need to know to become empowered are, you need to understand the autistic perspective, right? So number one, you have a diagnosis. This is what autism is. It's a spectrum. You need to understand the perspective of the autistic individual and how it is very different than yours if you are not autistic. You need to understand what the spectrum is. It's not mild to hot. It's not mild to moderate. It's not mild to profound, right? And that's a whole nother topic. But the spectrum involves lots of things: communication, sensory, executive functioning, motor planning,
and the love of trains.
And the love of trains, which the new little boy that I've been working with him and his mom, he's 2, and his mom's like, he just loves trains, but they live on an island, so there's not a lot of trains.
The other day I found a show on the History Channel's YouTube called
Mhm.
Trains Unlimited, from like when I was like a kid, on YouTube, and like a week just disappeared.
Yeah.
Like, I just disappeared into a hole of what's it called when autistic people obsess over something? Special interest. Of like
Yeah.
autistic special interest. I just disappeared like head first into the fiery rectum of an autistic special
So
interest.
you went into an intense monotropic state of flow.
Yes.
Yes.
But in
Yes.
my mind, it involves more like head up rectum. That's sort of how I picture it. Like, that's how I move. That's how I move through the world.
What am I going to do with you? What am I going to do with you, Torrin? Head of a rectum?
But honestly, I don't mean to sidetrack, but that's really accurately kind of more what it is. Like, we need people to understand autism, that monotropic straight state of flow, whatever you called it. No, what's happening is you are getting stuck in a ditch,
So
and
true.
your head is in a ditch, and you have lost all sense of time and space until someone pulls you out of it, or you like run out of stuff to binge watch.
But it's so great
That's
while
what
you're
it is. It's not like this beautiful. No, it's basically you just completely detached from the space time continuum.
I think that more people should take the time to do that.
Oh yeah,
However,
I agree. I'm just being honest with what it is.
yes. So, number one, you get a diagnosis, you need to have an idea of what autism is. Then, not an expert on it, just need to know what it is. Then you need to understand the perspective of the autistic individual, which involves understanding the spectrum component, right? And then once you understand the spectrum component, as a parent, when you recognize, like, oh, it's executive functioning, oh, it's this, then you learn about the therapy options or the school's resources, whatever that you have access to, right? And then you decide what works best for you, your child, your family, however you make those decisions. Um, so I'm just going to quickly recap. It's you get a diagnosis, okay, this is what it is. And then you have to sort of understand what it is and how it impacts the person who's actually diagnosed, and then the options of what do you do next, right? And so when parents are in that overwhelming state of what to do next, they're also bombarded by the third thing that can be really overwhelming, which is like, how do I tell family and friends? What do I say? Do I tell? Do I not tell? Like all of those things, right? Sometimes it's because they just want to avoid family pushback because family can be a headache. Sometimes it's shame based on culture. Sometimes it's just shame because parents feel responsible even though they're not. And sometimes it's just people just sometimes parents go in and out of denial, right? Like they're accepting, but they're not. So there's that stage as well. So I think part of empowerment is telling family how to tell them. And it's like anything else. You tell them what you know, you tell them what you want them to know, and then you tell them what you need from them. And I think that's the part that is so key to becoming an empowered parent, which is recognizing that you're going to need some help. Like it's okay to ask and give yourself permission to say, I really want to incorporate visuals. I do not have the patience to laminate and do Velcro. Ask someone. Usually there's someone who likes to do that. If you don't know anyone personally, then you can ask your child's therapist or ask the school, or you can find, if you have to belong to a church or something. People are willing to help, but you have to recognize that you're going to need a support system. I actually have a really, I thought it was a fun webinar that I recorded, and it's just about that. Like, what do you do? And it's talking about how you get resources. So then that brings me into that fourth component, and there's only five because five is my favorite number. In terms of, I do everything in fives, just in case you didn't realize that I do everything in five. Torrin, did I lose you? Where are you?
No, I'm listening.
Okay, all right. So number four is you've gotten the diagnosis, you are understanding a little bit more from the perspective of the autistic person and what the spectrum really means. So you have a little bit of information to share with family and to maybe ask for what you need, or even say, I'm not quite sure what I need yet, but I'll let you know. Well, then you have to kick into your support for yourself as a parent and for your family. So you have to think about how are you going to physically and emotionally support yourself so that you can support your child, right? And that requires asking for help, knowing your limitations, knowing what you're good at, what you're not good at, knowing how to say, hey, I'm going to tap out and let you handle this because I'm not really good at that. And I'd like to share a story because I've not shared a story, but I had a mother, just delightful human being, and she had two autistic sons and an undiagnosed, very autistic husband, who, which left her very lonely in the home because they were all sort of engineer processors and they were always creating things or reading. So not really seeking her social engagement, right? Because they were fine. They were like, we're good. I'm creating, I'm making, I'm doing something intellectual. So her youngest son was maybe not as much as she said, a nerd geek like the other two. And she wanted to do some things with him. So I gave her some activities to do. I knew it wasn't going to be successful, but I coached and guided her and hoped for the best. And it was a flop, as I expected it would be. And when she said, I just don't know what to do. And I said, well, would you like for me to tell you why it went wrong and what you should do next? And she said, please. And I said, you do not know how to play with joy. It's just not your nature. It's not your nature. I don't know if it wasn't something you experienced as a child. I don't know if it's just something that's just not who you are. I mean, everybody's not silly with kids, everybody's not playful. You're just not that person. So when you try to do it, it doesn't really work for you. It doesn't work for your kiddo. And it's almost like you're being disingenuous and trying to be something that you're not. So for those activities, you need to default to someone else to take that role. And then you need to take the role of something you do really well. And what do you do really well, Mom? And she said, oh, I love cooking and baking. Great. We can incorporate him into those activities and let someone else do the play. It's just not something. So, I share that story in terms of parents need to know themselves, which sometimes is a learning curve, so that you can know how to support your child and not overwhelm yourself. You can't do everything. The other part of that is, it's kind of like the oxygen mask. If you prioritize your needs, your support system you get in place, you know when you need to tap out, you can't take your child's verbal stimming, so you get your own headphones because you know your child needs to it and you want to be neuroaffirming, but oh my gosh, it's overwhelming your sensory system. You put things in place to prioritize your child's needs, but it works for everyone. So that's where that parent support empowerment component comes in. So last one, number 5 coming up, we're going to recap. You get a diagnosis, learn about autism. Then you kind of delve into number 2, which is understanding the perspective of the autistic individual. And then you look and see what that entails, which leads you to looking into whatever therapy options, supports, or you want to look into for your child. Then you have enough information to do number 3, which is to tell your family and friends. And really the only reason you're kind of telling your family and friends is because you do need to build your support system, right? And then once you start building your support system and learning what you know, that's where that number 4 comes in, with making sure you're taking care of your emotional, physical needs, making sure you're getting enough sleep. If you're not, get someone to shift out with you, get someone to stay over, like reach out. Like we cannot isolate ourselves. And if you have mood and you don't live around family, you need to freaking make friends. Like seriously, like we cannot live in this world alone. We have to take risks, right? And we can't expect our kids to go out into the world if we're not even taking risks to meet people, to build our own support system if we're not in our comfort zone or with people that we know. So once you've done all that and you're able to sort of prioritize your kids' needs, you have a plan, you blah, blah, blah. Guess what? Acceptance, number 5 comes. Advocating for acceptance. All of that advocating comes into play because now you know. You're learning still, but now you know. That acceptance is there because now you know. And when you have that knowledge, when you have that acceptance, when you are advocating for your child is watching, other people are watching. And I say all the time, when parents accept their child and advocate for their child, people who want to be around you and your child will follow. And if they don't, fuck them, they can go away. We don't need them anyway. Seriously. I posted something today about, where we've been told so often, people who are abusive, right? Whether it's emotional or physical, and it's a family member or a parent. And people say, well, we're family. Like we're just supposed to blow off the shit, right? Like we're just supposed to take crap from family because they're family and be abused because it's family. No, this is your child. Your child is expecting you while they are young and not capable of having autonomy over their place, time, and space. They need you to stand up for them. And so sometimes that requires pushing people's buttons, and you don't want them with your child anyway. Like one of my favorite stories is A mom of her 4-year-old son was diagnosed, and she had been working with me, and she called me and said, "Do you train grandparents?" And I said, "I love training grandparents and babysitters, caregivers, and nannies." So she said, "Well, I told my mom that she was not going to be able to have weekend visits, like, grandkids come over and they stay for the weekend until she went through training and understood, because I want his communication strategies to be in place when he's there, and I want his sensory needs to be met while he was there." So I told her, if you don't learn, he can't go. I love that, right? And the mom did, the grandmother came. So all of this, leads to those 5 things are sort of what I see as the foundation for becoming an empowered parent. You learn, you accept that you're learning as you go along. You're able to figure out what you need, what your child needs. You're able to help others, people understand so they can support you. And most of all, your child is watching. I cannot say that enough. They're watching when you fight for them. They're watching when you advocate for them. And they're watching how you speak about them in such a way that is so accepting. It doesn't matter what other people say about them. They always know they have someone at home that loves them and accepts them. And it's really that simple. And so that is what I think about when I think of parent empowerment. I don't think of parent empowerment of knowing anything and everything, right? That's not it. It's not about knowing all the answers. It's about knowing what questions to ask and where can I find the answers and which one of those answers works best for my family. That's it. And I want a clip of that part. Can I get a clip of that video part? I like the way I just said that. It came out organically and I liked it. Yeah, it is, but trying to pace myself, trying to pace myself. So that's it, Torrin. That's it. I know I've done a lot of talking, but that was good to get that out.
No, well, that was the idea, was for you to do the talking, for you to, as I said before, take us down this road, because I wanted something that there's going to be a little shorter episode, but I
Mhm.
wanted something that was concise and something that gives people an idea of what we try to do with this podcast, the stuff we're trying to do coming up in the future. I'm pretty sure, according to my scheduling, by the time this podcast comes out, we've already announced the opening of our parent empowerment center university.
Yes.
We haven't, by the time this comes out, we would have settled on a name by the time this comes out. So so it's almost like stuff we don't. By the time you, the listener, hear this, you will be privy to information we currently don't have. So you get bonus content with this episode. What
That's
other
true.
podcast
There
does
you
that
go.
for you? What other podcast gives you clairvoyance?
Hey, there you go. There you go. Oh my gosh, that's so funny. I'm
Anyway,
excited.
Stacy, before we get going, is there anything else you'd like to say?
Yeah, there is, but I'm going to keep it short. I think what I'd like to say is, for anyone who's listening, I don't want caregivers to think that becoming an empowered parent is or has to be an overwhelming experience. I want parents and caregivers, even autistic individuals, to know that it's a learning process. It's not about knowing everything and then, okay, I got it. It's about growing in, oh, I hate that corny part of it, but it really is about learning as you go. I mean, it's really that simple, but you need a foundation to know what the freak you need to learn. And I think one of the biggest things, and I promise this will be the last thing that I say. I know I've said that before, but one of the things that I think is so important for families, for parents, is you need to have a little bit of information so you know what questions to ask. And I don't think it's fair that parents are not given any information, therefore they don't even know where to start with a question. And I think that's what I want for parents. I want them to have questions. Before this podcast started, I told you I was on the phone with another mom, and I swear, I'm like, oh my gosh, those questions are, I love it. Like that is part of the learning process, right? That curiosity of wanting to know, not knowing all the answers, but thinking about, what does this mean? Should I, could I, would I? Maybe I shouldn't have. That's what I want. So when parents are empowered, children become empowered, autistic individuals that feel confident, and then the narrative around autism just starts to shift little by little. I was going to say something very inappropriate and political, and I'm glad I did not.
I might leave that in there. But Stacy, that's why we're working to
Shift the narrative on everything autism.
see ya.